Hello and welcome to this month's PDU podcast webinar titled 7 Factors to Successfully Lead Global Teams. And this month you have two Corneliuses. You have myself, Cornelius Fichtner, host, but the most important person here in the room with me is Dave Cornelius. Hello Dave, welcome.
Well, thank you, Cornelius. Thank you for having me. I am really happy to be here today, and a lot of people think that I am actually Cornelius.
Yes, that has happened to me. Somebody actually called me up and said, "Why are you back on the board of PMI Orange County?" And I'm like, "I'm not back on it. What do you mean?" Then I looked at the names. Said, "Oh, Dave Cornelius. Yes, he must have made a mistake there." All right, let me introduce you to everybody, Dave, because not everyone will know you. Nice picture of here. You are a senior manager with a consulting organization that delivers IT solutions globally. In previous roles, you have led Six Sigma Black Belt projects that resulted in 16 million in cost savings through business process improvement and waste reduction. As a leader, you have orchestrated numerous business and IT solutions to increase business value in your 29-year career. Previously, you were a business owner. You served as the CEO and CIO for 13 years. You've attracted Ford, Mercedes-Benz, ESPN, X Games, Toshiba, Time Warner, and Toyota as customers. The company provided IT consulting and multimedia production services as a core competency. Currently, you are pursuing your doctorate of management with the emphasis on information systems technology. We'll talk more about that towards the end of the presentation here. In your free time, you are a member of the OC Project Masters Toastmasters Club, PMI-OC affiliated organization serving the need of project managers and other professionals with the desire to improve their communication and leadership skills. Did that myself, and it really helped my presentation skills. Absolutely. You also volunteer as an usher in your church. Now, I've gone to your LinkedIn profile, and on your LinkedIn profile it says that my value proposition is success through team achievement by individual participation. Now, is that particular sentence the reason, Dave, why you have decided to talk about the 7 factors to successfully lead global teams? Is that about it?
Absolutely. I think it's essential for teams to come together, especially in a global setting, to be able to share information and for everyone to work cohesively. And you need certain disciplines to help you achieve those goals.
Our learning objectives. The PDU podcast is designed following the most current standard of PMI's REP program quality requirements. And in accordance with these quality requirements, each of our webinars includes learning objectives, learning outcomes, and an assessment of these outcomes. The objectives we have for you, they are the intended result of today's instruction. They also contain learning outcomes that we want you to achieve so that what you have learned is measurable. Together, objectives and outcomes describe significant and essential learning from our presentation here today that you as the learner will have gained and that you can also demonstrate in an assessment at the end of the webinar. Whew. That much said, at the conclusion of this presentation, you will be able to identify how and when to adapt your leadership style, choose ways how you can build trust on your team, select the effective or not effective conflict management behaviors, and identify drivers for project health measurements. As I mentioned earlier, PMI's REP program quality requirements state that the learning outcomes must be assessed, which means that this assessment will be done through an online test in which we will measure your achievement of these 4 learning goals.
If you work in IT or manufacturing, there is a strong possibility you will have to interface with global teams. The following 7 factors help you to achieve success in leading global teams. We look at cultural intelligence, communication, leadership, partnership, conflict management, best practices, and delivering the promise or business value to the organization.
Right. And these 7 factors, they are also our agenda here today. And right now our goal is to have one module, one separate video for you for each of these 7 factors. Very likely the last 2, they're quite short. That's probably just going to be one. We're doing this on the fly here with the recording. We'll decide which ones maybe merge it into one, but this is our agenda. This is what we will be doing. So we'll be starting out with cultural intelligence right now, correct?
That's correct. The definition of the 7 factors follows. Cultural intelligence is having knowledge about other cultures and accepting the differences. Communications. We look at connecting, sharing, and exchanging information with each other. Leadership. Influencing others to follow your vision. Partnership. Collaboration and trust. Conflict management. Managing differences with emotional intelligence. Best practices. We want to do things consistently in a measurable way. And delivering the promise or business value. We're looking to apply financial and efficiency benefits to the organization. Leading global teams has its own challenges. One of the things that happens is globalization creates the appearances of a smaller and flatter world. But there's an introduction of cultural diversity, and you realize that it's not as flat at all. Organizations source complex and strategic projects to low-cost offshore operations, hoping for results at a lower cost. Managing the project constraints of scope, quality, budget, schedule, resources, and risk requires collaboration between team members with greater cultural experiences. The more diverse the project team members, the leaders will require more multinational skills. Cultural intelligence, its definition by the Harvard Business Review, is it pertains to the ability to understand the differences and similarities in people. Brake in 2008 described cultural intelligence as the ability to read and understand different ways of being in the world and to apply that understanding to achieving goals. Companies have indigenous cultures that require new team members to learn how to navigate. It takes a few weeks and sometimes months to decipher cultural codes by the various words that we use. The way we speak, sometimes we do things as fist bumps and high fives. Various things that provides cultural codes. The behaviors of cultural intelligence really pertains to personal adaptation, which is really feeling comfortable and well adjusted to a foreign setting. You may have practical efficacy, which really pertains to efficiency or effectiveness and the capacity to complete a task in a foreign setting. And as a consultant, I could tell you foreign settings are sometimes that I am in another company or another part of the world and trying to achieve an objective where language sometimes becomes a barrier. Cultural intelligence requires a successful interpretation of and sending signals like gestures, words, and different actions that we may apply. We have this metacognition, which is the ability to really self-monitor our behavior, the way we provide feedback to people, and the way we do things in a continuous way. How do we change and adapt to really fit into the world that we're sometimes just thrown into to try and achieve the goals that is set forth by the organization? Through the process of cultural intelligence, you have to manage cultures. And there are 4 that we'll identify in this presentation. There are world cultures, the cultures of countries, which shapes the character and competencies of individuals. So you look at the United States, for example. The United States has probably the most PhDs in the entire world. You look at it from a national perspective, which shaped the values and character of the leaders. You look at Colin Powell, which is the former Secretary of State for the United States. Leadership. which shapes the culture and competencies of the organization, Steve Jobs, and the way Apple has moved along as an organization. You have a business culture, which shapes and alters the country's history. You could look at Ford in terms of what they've done in the manufacturing process. Microsoft, let's put a PC on everyone's desktop. Enron, disastrous, countrywide, completely disastrous with a housing bubble.
Right. I'd like to go one level deeper because we do talk about project management and leading global teams here. Don't we also have team culture? You know, once the team kind of has formed, you have a culture in your team that you have to learn to manage. How does that come into play?
Well, team culture is very important in terms of how people interact and what are the norms that are exchanged between members. For example, how do we communicate on a daily basis? Are we going to use instant message? Will we leverage things like emails? When I pick up the phone and call you? How do we really interact? And I think that's one of the key importance of team culture is the ability to communicate in an effective way. And it's also is how do we respect each other? And how do we learn to trust each other? Because I have never met you. You're 17 hours away from where I am or even further away, and I've never seen you. So the only options that we have is to build some level of trust based on the level of work that we've provided and our ability to trust and communicate with each other.
Right. If I remember right, communication and trust topics that are coming up in the presentation later on.
That's correct.
Okay.
Let me tell you about my first cultural intelligence moment, or the one that I can recall. My first experience was in 2004. I became friends with a coworker from India. And he would shake his head from side to side when we were in discussions. One of the things that I did not realize is that shaking your head left to right is a form of agreement in India. In the United States, you interpret that as being no. We made an agreement at one point, and we're in a meeting, and I asked that my friend, well, here is the certain scenario, and he said, well, he shook his head in the opposite direction.
Okay. Now I have to jump in because you can't see what I'm seeing here, okay? So Dave is actually not shaking his head with the nose going left to right. Dave is shaking his head with the top going left to right. Okay? Big difference there, right? Okay, yes.
That is absolutely true.
Yeah. So it's more of a pivot, maybe? Or what do you call this movement?
Oh, I would call it the bobblehead dog.
Okay, yes, all right. Bobblehead.
Yes, the bobblehead dog, going back and forth.
You put your right ear on your right shoulder, your left ear on your left shoulder, so you do kind of this movement, but only small. Okay, sorry, but I needed to explain this because shaking your head can be interpreted different ways. Please continue.
That is very true. And what actually took place is that my friend was agreeing with me.
Right.
And I became very adamant because I misinterpreted. I said, when we last spoke, you said that you agreed with this certain situation. Now you're shaking your head saying no. And then he looked at me and says, in India, this is how we agree. This was my moment of lack of cultural intelligence. And this is something that I've learned to go forward. So every time I think of that and I see a bobblehead doll in the back of someone's car or in the front, I think of my friend. So there's always something interesting with some of these cultural intelligence moments. Let me tell you what I've learned about working with teams in Bangalore, India. I interviewed a few business associates from locally and those who work in Bangalore and live in Bangalore. And this is what they've shared with me. Normally, India team members do not question the objective of the project. So the project leader must be proactive and verify if they understand the assigned task. Nodding the head in the opposite direction, which means putting your left ear on your left shoulder, the bobblehead doll, really means yes. At times, there's very little eye contact out of respect for leaders. Team members located, at the remote site may not understand the big picture. For example, like our housing market and how that really works, because in the United States it's very unique compared to living in India. This often requires, really talking about the importance of the time frame to deliver things and the frequency. You have lots of young people living in the early stages of their career. Most of the young professionals live with their parents and take care of their parents financially. Companies in India often provide health care for their associates and family members. And we know Bollywood. India has a big movie industry, and people love to watch movies and listen to music. There's frequent gathering and parties with friends and families. And really trying to understand the number of festivals and really understand the reasons why they have them, helps to build relationships. I see that as very important at times when we have some members here in the United States where we could have different parties to support some of those festivals. Because a lot of time in India, those are days off, which means there's no work or productivity being done. And one thing that was very interesting is that sometimes they would say to me on the phone, well, I'm going to my native. And I'm going like, well, what going to their native? Well, actually where they're assigned is like they're going to the place where their family originated. So a lot of time they may live in work in Bangalore, but actually live in another area of India. And so that represents their native. The Project Management Institute, PMBOK, which is the body of knowledge, defined cultural norms as a common knowledge to perform work in a certain way, acceptable ways to perform the work, assigned resources that influence how the work is done. It also looks at organizational cultures as being manifested through shared vision, values, norms, beliefs, and expectations. Look at the various policies and methods and procedures that are established within the organization. They look at a view of authority relationships and the ethics pertaining to how we work and the hours that we do work. As a leader, you have to be prepared and really engage in cultural intelligence readiness. We must recognize that our team members come from different cultures and backgrounds, whether it's global or local. There has to be an awareness of the differences, and you have to, in culture, and really respecting the different behaviors and cultures that come from members of our team. This really helps us to create a very strong environment of satisfaction for our members. One thing that you can do, the first thing I would say, is read about cultural intelligence and the culture of your team. There's a book called Global Literacy by Robert Rosen. Identify team values, and this could be truthfulness, kind, loyal, fun, and happy. Those are some common values that you may look at and identify for your team. Look at symbolic agreements. What about dress codes, work hours? Meetings, how frequency, how long will they run? How decisions are made? Conflict management and work-life balance are just basic symbolic agreements that you could look at. How about identifying some shared assumptions? Everyone loves pizza. With India, I could say and have a great fun conversation and saying the West Indies has the best cricket team because cricket is huge in India. And that would go over very well with the team members. I said develop a roadmap that really looks at the project needs, strengths, and goals. And really define how the team will celebrate the cultural differences. Have a party. Make sure that they come in and dress up in their natural garb. It's always interesting to see people bring in different types of foods and see how they would normally dress at some of their festivities. I think this helps you to build a very strong multicultural community with a common purpose.
I have a question for you regarding the cultural intelligence plan that we see here. Now, this plan, do I set this plan up for myself? Do I set this plan up for the team? Do I share this? Is this something that we work on together? How do I implement this?
Well, the best way to implement your cultural intelligence plan is with the team. You may create a straw man in terms of some of the assumptions that you may have and things that you may want to deliver. But more importantly, I think as you engage the team to really bring some of their ideas and things that you obviously won't know, you create a stronger plan in that way.
All right, and I think this is a nice segue to the final slide here in the presentation. Teamwork on cultural intelligence, what you can do next. If I understand this correctly, the presentation that we're seeing right now was given as a 4-hour-long advanced topics seminar for PMI Orange County, and there you also had some team activities, and this would now be a breakout session, correct?
That is correct. I believe that in terms of how people obtain knowledge is for them to actually take what they just learned and go practice it. So one of the things that we would want them to do, and what you can do after listening to this podcast, is really identify the cultural norms of your selected team or country or whatever is assigned to you in your global approach. And think of how will you apply cultural intelligence the next time that you meet someone that's maybe a little bit different than you are. And really understand some of the challenges and constraints that you may run into as you go through trying to establish a plan.
All right, and this here is the last slide of the first of the 7 factors, and what we're going to do is the final slides on each factor is going to be some kind of a teamwork homework for you, our listeners here really. You will find a PDF document that contains all of these final slides included in the PDU podcast, and you can use that to work your way through the various breakout sessions that Dave has prepared for this presentation here. And with that, we have come to the end of the first of the 7 factors, cultural intelligence, and also the end of Module 1 here. We will see you again in Module 2, when we will talk about communication.